There is a quiet kind of beauty in being deeply seen, and most people spend their entire lives without ever truly experiencing it. So, before we go any further, allow yourself to settle into this moment with me for just a little while, because something inside you may recognize these words long before your mind fully understands them. Someone younger than you is thinking about you far more than they should, more intensely than they expected, more emotionally than they are willing to admit out loud. And strangely, it is not because of your appearance alone. It is not because you tried to impress them. It is because your presence awakens something inside them that people their age rarely awaken. Something calm, something safe, something painfully real. And whether you realize it or not, the connection between you and them is already changing both of your inner worlds in ways neither of you completely understands yet. There are certain people who enter our lives and disturb the emotional balance we carefully built to protect ourselves, not through chaos, but through emotional gravity. Carl Jung once spoke deeply about the unconscious forces that guide attraction, projection, and emotional attachment. And what many people fail to understand is this: attraction is rarely about age alone. Human beings are drawn toward emotional experiences that complete something missing within themselves. Sometimes, a younger soul becomes attached to an older person because they sense emotional depth they cannot find anywhere else. Not perfection, not superiority, but emotional substance, the kind that feels rare in a world filled with temporary attention and shallow connection. You may have already noticed it without fully understanding it: the lingering eye contact, the strange emotional nervousness around you, the way they remember small details you forgot mentioning, the way their energy changes when you enter a room, and perhaps part of you dismissed it because you assumed it could not possibly be real. After all, why would someone younger become emotionally consumed by you? But the truth is, emotional attraction does not follow logical formulas. The subconscious mind responds to emotional safety, psychological mystery, emotional maturity, and unspoken understanding far more than people realize. The first reason they are becoming deeply attached to you is because your emotional energy feels different from the world they grew up in. Most younger people today are surrounded by emotional inconsistency, fast conversations, temporary affection, surface-level attraction disguised as intimacy. They live in a world where people communicate constantly but understand each other very little. And then suddenly, they encounter you, someone who speaks slower, someone whose silence carries meaning instead of awkwardness, someone who does not desperately chase validation every second. And to them, that emotional difference feels magnetic. What they feel around you is not simply attraction, it is relief. Relief from emotional noise, relief from pretending, relief from the exhausting pressure of performing constantly for attention. When you speak calmly, they feel grounded. When you genuinely listen, they feel visible. And when you remain emotionally composed while others react impulsively, their subconscious begins associating you with emotional safety. That feeling becomes addictive in ways they cannot explain to themselves, because deep inside, many younger souls are emotionally starving for steadiness. And perhaps what confuses them most is that you never seem desperate to be noticed. You carry yourself with a quiet self-awareness that naturally creates curiosity. People often assume attraction comes from trying harder, speaking louder, showing more. But psychologically, the opposite is often true. Emotional restraint creates mystery. Inner peace creates intrigue. Someone younger may become obsessed with understanding you precisely because you do not constantly reveal yourself. Your emotional depth feels like an ocean they cannot immediately reach the bottom of. This is why they replay your conversations in their head late at night, why simple interactions suddenly carry emotional weight, why they overanalyze the tone of your voice, your pauses, your attention, your distance. Because your presence activates their subconscious imagination. And once imagination becomes emotionally attached to someone, the connection deepens rapidly, especially when loneliness already exists beneath the surface. Loneliness is one of the most misunderstood emotional forces in human psychology. Many people think loneliness simply means being alone, but some of the loneliest people are surrounded by constant noise, constant messages, constant temporary relationships. Younger generations often experience emotional overstimulation without emotional intimacy. They receive attention without understanding, desire without devotion, contact without connection. And then they encounter someone like you, someone whose energy feels emotionally intentional rather than emotionally scattered. You may not realize how healing your emotional presence feels to them. Sometimes you simply speak honestly. Sometimes you remain calm during moments where others become emotionally reactive. Sometimes you show patience without trying to manipulate. But for someone younger who has spent years around emotional unpredictability, your steadiness feels almost sacred. They begin associating you with emotional rest, and human beings become deeply attached to whatever makes their nervous system finally feel calm. The second reason they are falling for you so intensely is because you unconsciously embody emotional maturity they secretly crave for themselves. This goes deeper than romance, much deeper. What they see in you is a version of emotional balance they are still struggling to build within themselves. You represent something psychologically aspirational, not because you are flawless, but because your wounds taught you something valuable. People who have suffered emotionally and survived with softness still intact carry a different energy, a wiser energy. There is a quiet sadness in them, but also warmth, a calm understanding of human pain. Younger people often feel emotionally exposed around individuals like this because authenticity recognizes authenticity. Your scars speak even when you say nothing about them. The way you respond to disappointment, the way you protect your peace, the way you no longer beg for love that does not choose you. All of this silently communicates emotional intelligence, and without realizing it, they begin admiring you not only emotionally, but psychologically. They study your behavior, your restraint, your self-control, your emotional awareness. They wonder how you became this way, what heartbreak shaped you, what loneliness taught you, why your eyes sometimes carry both strength and sadness at the same time. Human beings are naturally drawn toward emotional complexity because it feels real. And in a world where so many people hide behind masks, emotional realism becomes irresistible. Sometimes this attachment grows strongest when you least expect it. Perhaps you were simply kind to them during a moment when nobody else noticed their pain. Perhaps you spoke to them without judgment. Perhaps you treated them with emotional respect instead of manipulation. Never underestimate how powerful basic emotional safety becomes in a wounded generation. Many people are starving for gentleness while pretending they do not need anyone at all. This is why younger people sometimes become emotionally attached to older souls so intensely, not because they are seeking authority, but because they are seeking emotional truth. They are exhausted by games, exhausted by emotional inconsistency, exhausted by relationships built entirely on ego and performance. And when they encounter someone emotionally grounded, something inside them relaxes for the first time in years. But here is where things become psychologically complicated. Often, the younger person themselves does not fully understand why their emotions are becoming so intense. At first, they may try dismissing it as admiration, then curiosity, then attraction. But slowly, it becomes emotional dependency. They start craving your attention more than they intended. Your approval begins affecting their mood. Your silence suddenly feels heavy. Your distance becomes emotionally painful. And this confuses them because the intensity feels disproportionate to the actual time spent together. What they are experiencing is emotional imprinting, a subconscious process where the nervous system begins attaching emotional security to a specific person. This happens most powerfully when someone enters our life during emotional vulnerability. If they were already feeling unseen, emotionally disconnected, insecure, lonely, or psychologically lost when they met you, your presence may have unconsciously become associated with emotional stability and inner comfort. And once emotional imprinting occurs, ordinary interactions begin carrying extraordinary emotional meaning. A delayed message suddenly feels personal. A short conversation feels unforgettable. A small compliment echoes in their mind for days. Even your absence begins speaking to them emotionally, because the subconscious mind always magnifies what it fears losing. This is why emotionally mature people must be careful with unconscious influence. Sometimes you may not even realize the emotional impact you have on others. Your calmness may become someone else's emotional addiction. Your understanding may become their emotional refuge. And while that sounds beautiful, it can also become dangerous if emotional boundaries disappear completely. The third reason they are becoming madly attached to you is because you awaken both emotional comfort and emotional mystery at the same time. And psychologically, this combination is extraordinarily powerful. Most people only create one or the other. Some people create excitement but no emotional safety. Others create comfort but no emotional tension. But when someone feels emotionally safe with you, while simultaneously feeling unable to completely understand you, the subconscious becomes deeply fascinated. Your depth becomes emotionally haunting to them. They sense there are hidden layers inside you they have not fully reached yet, and human beings become obsessed with emotionally unfinished mysteries. This is why they keep searching your expressions, your silences, your emotional shifts. They notice tiny changes in your energy because subconsciously they are trying to understand what exists beneath your composure, especially if you are someone who does not emotionally overshare easily. Mystery intensifies attachment because the imagination fills the empty spaces with emotional fantasy. But there is something even deeper happening beneath all of this. Very often, younger people project emotional fantasies onto emotionally mature individuals. Jung described projection as the unconscious tendency to place our hidden desires, unmet emotional needs, and idealized images onto another person. In simple terms, they may not only be seeing you for who you truly are, they may also be seeing who they emotionally need you to be. Perhaps they see safety in you because they never fully felt safe emotionally before. Perhaps they see wisdom because they feel internally lost. Perhaps they see emotional strength because they are exhausted from carrying invisible pain alone. And because these emotional needs run so deep, their attachment grows rapidly. But projection is dangerous because eventually reality arrives. No human being can permanently carry someone else's emotional fantasies without emotional consequences. Sooner or later, they must confront the truth that you are human too. You have fears, wounds, contradictions, emotional limitations, days where you feel uncertain, days where your own loneliness becomes heavy. And this moment often determines whether the connection transforms into genuine emotional intimacy or collapses under unrealistic expectations. Real love begins where fantasy ends. And strangely enough, this is where many emotionally younger people begin truly growing. Because authentic emotional connection forces psychological evolution. Loving someone deeply exposes every insecurity hiding beneath the surface. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of vulnerability, fear of emotional dependence. Suddenly, all these hidden fears rise into awareness because attachment always reveals the parts of ourselves we have not healed yet. You may notice them pulling closer emotionally one moment, then withdrawing the next. This emotional inconsistency is often not manipulation. Sometimes it is fear. Fear of needing someone too much, fear of becoming emotionally exposed, fear of losing control over their feelings. Younger individuals especially may struggle balancing emotional intensity with emotional stability because they are still learning themselves. And if you have lived long enough, you know how terrifying real vulnerability can feel. People speak casually about love as if it is simple, but genuine emotional intimacy is psychologically overwhelming. To truly care for someone means they gain the power to emotionally affect you. Their silence can wound you. Their distance can haunt you. Their absence can change the emotional atmosphere of your entire day. And many people spend years pretending they do not care deeply, simply because caring deeply feels dangerous. This is why emotionally detached people are often the most emotionally hungry. They convince themselves they want independence, when in reality, they fear disappointment. They pretend not to need affection because emotional rejection once shattered something inside them. And sometimes, your emotional warmth quietly melts defenses they spent years building. That alone can make the attachment feel uncontrollable for them, especially if you possess what Jung might describe as integrated emotional energy. There are people who become softer after pain, and people who become harder. But individuals who face their shadow honestly often develop a rare emotional balance. They understand darkness without becoming consumed by it. They become emotionally aware without becoming emotionally cold. Younger souls instinctively feel this difference. They sense when someone has truly suffered, healed, reflected, and transformed internally. That energy carries depth words cannot fake, and depth is becoming increasingly rare. Modern attraction often moves quickly but shallowly. People learn how to appear desirable without learning how to emotionally connect. Conversations become performances. Relationships become temporary distractions from loneliness rather than genuine soul encounters. But when someone meets a person who still values emotional depth, meaningful silence, loyalty, patience, and inner understanding, the experience feels almost unreal. That is why they cannot stop thinking about you, not because you are perfect, but because you made them feel something emotionally authentic in a world full of emotional numbness. And perhaps part of you already sensed this before hearing these words tonight. Perhaps you noticed the emotional tension in their eyes, the nervous excitement around your attention, the way they subtly seek emotional reassurance from you, the strange sadness they carry when they think you are emotionally distant. Human beings reveal attachment in thousands of tiny, unconscious ways, long before they confess it verbally. But there is another truth you must understand carefully. Sometimes people fall in love not only with who you are, but with how they feel around you. This distinction matters deeply, because emotional chemistry can create powerful illusions. A younger person may feel emotionally alive around you for the first time in years, and mistake that awakening as certainty. But emotional intensity alone does not guarantee emotional compatibility. Sometimes connections enter our lives not to last forever, but to awaken forgotten parts of ourselves. And yet even temporary connections can transform us permanently. Some people arrive in our lives carrying mirrors we never expected. Through them, we suddenly see our loneliness more clearly, our hidden desires, our emotional wounds, our longing to be understood, our fear of aging, our fear of irrelevance, our hunger for tenderness. Sometimes a younger person's affection awakens emotional parts of you that had quietly gone asleep. Perhaps they remind you that your heart is still alive, that despite disappointments, betrayals, emotional exhaustion, and years spent protecting yourself, you are still capable of deeply affecting another human being. There is something profoundly healing about realizing your emotional presence still matters, that someone feels calmer because you exist, that your words linger in another person's mind after conversations end. Human beings need to feel emotionally meaningful, and when life becomes repetitive, emotionally distant or lonely, unexpected affection can feel almost spiritually overwhelming, especially if you had already convinced yourself that nobody truly sees you anymore. Many emotionally mature people quietly carry invisible loneliness beneath their composed exterior. They become experts at functioning while emotionally starving internally. So when someone younger begins loving them intensely, it does not only awaken excitement, it awakens grief too. Grief for lost years, lost versions of themselves, lost innocence, lost opportunities, lost emotional openness. Sometimes their affection forces you to confront how long it has been since someone looked at you with genuine emotional fascination. And that realization alone can shake the soul. But emotional wisdom requires honesty. Ask yourself carefully, are they truly in love with you? Or are they emotionally attached to the safety, mystery, and emotional reflection you provide? Sometimes the difference becomes blurred. Real love requires seeing another person clearly beyond projection, fantasy, loneliness, or emotional escape. And very few people reach that level of emotional clarity immediately. Still, none of this makes their feelings less real. Feelings born from projection still hurt. Emotional attachment born from loneliness still feels intense. Human emotions do not become fake simply because they are psychologically complicated. In fact, the deepest emotional experiences are often deeply contradictory. Love and fear coexist. Desire and insecurity coexist. Intimacy and distance coexist. Human beings are emotionally layered creatures. That is why simple explanations never fully capture the truth of attraction. Sometimes, someone younger falls for you because your emotional maturity makes them feel protected. Sometimes because your pain makes them feel understood. Sometimes because your mystery activates their imagination. Sometimes because your gentleness heals wounds they never spoke about. And sometimes because your presence reminds them of the person they secretly wish to become. The heart is rarely rational, and perhaps that is what makes these connections feel so powerful. Not their certainty, but their emotional unpredictability. The way they slowly enter your thoughts without permission. the way ordinary moments suddenly feel emotionally charged, the way a single conversation can echo through the mind for days afterward. Deep emotional attraction often arrives quietly before revealing its full intensity all at once, like rain before a storm. But if there is one thing emotionally mature people eventually learn, it is this: do not become intoxicated only by being desired. Desire can be temporary, projection can fade, loneliness can disguise itself as love. Instead, pay attention to emotional consistency, emotional honesty, emotional responsibility. Ask whether the connection creates peace beneath the intensity, or only emotional chaos disguised as passion. Because real connection should deepen your soul, not destabilize your entire sense of self. And yet, there is undeniable beauty in being emotionally chosen by someone unexpectedly, especially when they see parts of you the world overlooked. Sometimes younger souls notice emotional beauty older hearts stopped recognizing within themselves. They notice your patience, your depth, your quiet strength, your emotional intelligence, the warmth hidden beneath your guardedness. Do not underestimate how rare those qualities have become. People remember how you make them feel emotionally, long after appearances fade, long after temporary excitement disappears. Emotional memory stays alive inside the nervous system for years. That is why some people never truly forget certain connections, because specific individuals altered their emotional world permanently. Maybe that is what is happening here. Maybe your presence interrupted their emotional numbness. Maybe your understanding made them feel emotionally safe enough to soften again. Maybe your silence felt more intimate than loud affection ever could. And maybe they are terrified by how deeply they already feel connected to you. Because intense emotional attachment can feel beautiful and frightening simultaneously, especially when the age difference creates psychological tension. They may question themselves constantly, wonder if their emotions are irrational, wonder whether you could ever truly understand what they feel, wonder whether the connection exists only inside their imagination. And meanwhile, their subconscious continues pulling them emotionally closer. This internal conflict often makes their behavior confusing. One day they seem emotionally fearless around you, the next day distant, reserved, quiet. But beneath that inconsistency is often emotional overwhelm. Human beings pull away when feelings become too intense to process comfortably, especially younger individuals who are still learning emotional regulation and self-understanding. And if you respond with patience rather than ego, the connection often deepens even further. Because emotional patience communicates safety. The world today teaches people to react instantly, abandon quickly, detach immediately. But emotional maturity understands that human beings are complicated. Sometimes people need space not because they care less, but because they care too much and do not know how to handle it yet. This is where your awareness matters. Do not manipulate their attachment simply because it feels flattering. Do not exploit emotional vulnerability for temporary validation. If someone genuinely feels emotionally drawn toward you, treat that tenderness carefully. Human hearts remember emotional carelessness for years. Sometimes, one insensitive moment creates wounds that echo through someone's self-worth far longer than we realize. Real emotional